Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Richard Arjun Kaul, and welcome to Nine. Today is September the 3rd, 2015, and I'm talking to you from New York City in New York. Medicine, Western medicine, really only started in the 17th century, as we know it today. Before that, European cultures tended to depend upon a very sort of unscientific way of healing. And if one goes back even further into ancient India and ancient China, there were healing techniques and systems, the Indian one being referred to as Ayurvedic. But with Western medicine and its European roots, it started principally in England, Germany, France and Italy. It has principally adopted a scientific and an empirically based approach. And when medicine first started, it was a very generalized practice. There was no subspecialization. There were no orthopedic surgeons, there were no neurosurgeons, there were no pediatricians, there were just doctors. And for a couple of centuries, doctors were really generalists. They did everything. They delivered babies, they examined kids for coughs and colds, they operated on people's bodies when they'd had accidents or broken bones. Now, around the turn of the century, and I think probably into the 1920s and 1930s, the profession of medicine began to become slightly more specialized. As technologies improved, they recognized that to acquire the skills and the knowledge to be able to do certain procedures and to practice in a particular speciality required a separate type of training than a generalist would have. And if one fast forwards to the late 1980s, 1990s, that's when spine surgery began to really become a separate speciality. Before then, it was, first of all, it wasn't a particularly popular procedure for either patients, and it still isn't, or surgeons, because the outcomes were so poor. And most doctors really didn't want to go near patients that had chronic back pain because they really didn't know what to do and the outcomes were so unacceptable. But then in the 1980s and the 1990s, Fluroscopic Guidance and Interpretation came into being. And what that is, I've talked about this before, it's a portable X-ray machine that allows the doctor to visualize the bony structures of the spine, so that when he's operating, he's able to see exactly where he's placing pieces of hardware, such as pedicle screws or interbody devices. So 1992-93, it started to really develop. And at that time, it was mostly neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons and some general surgeons performing these procedures. Now, from 1993 to about 2000, 2001, things didn't really change in the field of spine surgery. And what physicians noticed was that patients who had back surgery generally did not do well. The outcomes in terms of patients having acceptable outcomes were really only about 45 to 50% of patients who were operated on. And in fact, a lot of the patients who had back surgery got worse. And the reason they got worse was because the approach to the spine was a very aggressive approach. There would be a lot of muscle dissection and removal. There would be a lot of resection of the bony elements of the spinal column and the supporting ligaments and cartilage. And so this was called, or referred to clinically, as failed back syndrome. And there would be development of a significant amount of scar tissue in the area that had been operated on, so that the patient ended up actually, in many cases, being more disabled than they were before the surgery. So around 2000, people started to look for less invasive ways of accessing the spine. And fluoroscopic guidance and interpretation was now a common part of interventional pain practice and medical practice. So the CR, as we call it, started to be used more in spine surgery, and smaller instruments were developed, tubular retractors and endoscopes, which were used to decompress herniated discs and to carry out lumbar fusions. So if we fast forward from 2000 to 2005, that's when what's been referred to as the spine turf wars began. Now, the spine turf wars is a professional medical battle, and it's been probably one of the biggest professional battles in medicine for the last at least decade, if not more. And it's in essence, it's a battle between, on the one side, the neurosurgeons, and on the other side, the interventional pain physicians. Now, the neurosurgeons take the position that because they've been doing spine surgery for a longer period of time, they're the ones that are qualified to perform these procedures. The interventional pain physicians say, well, actually, no, you're not most qualified, we're the ones that are most qualified because we're the most adept at fluoroscopic guidance and interpretation, which is the central component of minimally invasive spine surgery. So, these differing opinions have led to many professional battles between these two groups, which have ended up in courts and before medical boards and on the front of many newspapers. And it's, in many ways, this really is the history of medicine, because when you look at Western medicine, each time a new technology or a new approach has entered the arena, there's always a lot of difference in opinion as to who's most qualified and who's not qualified. Now, I'm talking from a point of personal experience on this issue, having been one of the main characters on this battlefield of the spine turf wars. There's myself, another physician called Dr. Solomon Campson, and a number of other interventional pain physicians over the years who have been very innovative in developing techniques to treat spine conditions. Now, today I was sent an article from one of my colleagues in Australia, and the title of the article was "French Doctor Accuses Group of Surgeons of Running Him Out of Practice in Townsville." Now, Townsville is a small town in Queensland, which is on the eastern coast of Australia. And I'm just going to read the article because I think it's a very well-written article, and I think it tells one of the stories of the spine turf wars and how it's not just an American phenomenon, but it seems to be a global phenomenon. And the article was written by two authors, Steve Kinane and Amy Sheridan. And it was published on Thursday, the 3rd of September, and it says a French doctor has accused a group of surgeons, including a former president of the Neurological Society of Australasia, of driving him out of practice in Townsville. Dr. Richard Emery says he was forced to move back to France with his Australian family after he was subjected to a series of complaints about his complication rate during spinal surgery. After 5 years working as a surgeon at Townsville Hospital in North Queensland, Dr. Emery decided to move into private practice. It was at this point, in 2008, he says he received a hostile phone call from Dr. Eric Guazo, a local surgeon who was then president of the Neurological Society of Australasia. He basically said, if you move to private practice, you won't be able to perform surgery in no time, so go back to France, said Dr. Emery. Dr. Guazo denies having had any conversation of this nature with Dr. Emery. Dr. Emery says the complaints began after he moved into private practice. After 3 months, I was audited by Mater Hospital from an anonymous complaint saying that my level of complication was far too high. It was to be the first of many audits. There were complaints about his use of item numbers. He audited that, and it was no more abnormal than other surgeons. There were complaints about his complication rates, so he audited a year of his surgery, and there was nothing out of the ordinary in the hospital related to his surgery. said John Stokes, a former director of medical services for Mater Hospital, Townsville. After Dr. Emery had passed 3 audits, another complaint was made about him, this time to the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, the AHPRA, which is the national body that regulates and licenses all health practitioners. That meant another audit and being placed on conditional registration. Dr. Rob Kuru and Dr. Brian Ashman, 2 surgeons from outside the region, reviewed at least 18 months' worth of Dr. Emery's operations. Dr. Kuru told Lateline, which is a current affairs show in Australia, that Dr. Emery's complication rate was within acceptable limits for someone undertaking the kind of work he was doing. In February last year, Dr. Emery made a presentation to his local craft group of neurosurgeons and orthopaedic surgeons at the Mater Hospital. Following this meeting, the craft group of surgeons put another complaint to the AHPRA, which is the regulatory body, despite claims by Dr. Emery and Dr. John Stokes that no major criticisms were raised at the meeting. Lateline has obtained a copy of the letter sent by the group to AHPRA. It says in part, "We all feel that Dr. Richard Emery's rate of major clinical complication was well above what would be acceptable surgical practice. As a craft group, we have had ongoing concerns with regards to Dr. Emery's practice, but the latest audit presentation is deemed unacceptable by us." The letter was signed by 9 local surgeons, including Dr. Guazo, whilst 1 surgeon abstained. Lateline has been told that only 5 members of the craft group witnessed the presentation by Dr. Emery that led to this critical letter of complaint. None of the 9 surgeons who signed this letter of complaint would speak with Lateline on camera. However, lawyers for Dr. Guazo sent a statement to Lateline that says, "Dr. Guazo categorically denies conducting any conversation with Dr. Emery in 2008 or otherwise, in which he made any comments that could be taken or misconstrued as threats. Dr. Guazo has, at all times, conducted himself professionally and in accordance with his legal and ethical professional obligations." Despite believing the craft group's auditing process was used to target Dr. Emery, Dr. Stokes had to tell him that without the support of his peers, he could no longer operate at the Mater Hospital for insurance reasons. By March last year, Dr. Emery had had enough. He had been subjected to numerous complaints, medical supervision, restrictions on his practice, and now his livelihood was being taken away from him. He headed to the cliff face at the top of Castle Hill in Townsville, and in his words, he was ready to jump. "One day I got home and I got a text message saying, 'Take care of the kids,'" the surgeon's wife Celine Emery told Lateline. "I thought he had gone for a run. And when I got the message, I understood straight away that he had gone somewhere. I knew he was running up Castle Hill from time to time, so I drove up there. I couldn't see him. I drove up and up and up, and I thought it was a question of time. I kept calling, and he wouldn't answer, and I was really hoping it wasn't going to be too late, and I found him. I found him, and I thought, thank God. He was just sitting. And I told him, it's all okay. We'll just go back home, and everything will be fine." In the same year, Dr. Stokes was notified to the APRHA on 2 occasions. He considers these complaints to be vexatious and says they were generated because he spoke out against an unfair process used against Dr. Emery. A good friend of mine died, who I tried to resuscitate on the roadside, and I survived with major injury, he said. That was used to claim that I was mentally incompetent and that I should be deregistered. Local Liberal MP, Member of Parliament, Warren Ench, says he is appalled by what has happened in Dr. Emery's case and wants the complaints process overhauled. If it's shown that these individuals are doing this and there's no basis for it, or it's done out of malice or greed, those individuals that have made those allegations need to be held responsible for their actions, he said. In September last year, Mr. Ench wrote to the then Health Minister, Peter Dutton, seeking an overhaul of the AHPRA complaint system. Unfortunately, I got no real response, other than to say my concerns were being acknowledged. That was in 2014. Since that time, I've written again. I've sent that letter to the new minister, Suzanne Ley, said Mr. Ench. Dr. Emery and his family have since moved back to France, but he's still under investigation from AHPRA. His wife Celine hopes to see his name cleared, just for her own serenity of mind. Celine Emery says she knows of similar cases in other parts of Australia. We are aware that some other surgeons, foreign-trained surgeons, are in a similar situation, and I wouldn't want their families to be in the same situation as we went through. Lateline understands the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is currently investigating Dr. Richard Emery's case. This story, which I say was sent to me today by a colleague of mine who lives in Perth, and who has been following my case for the last 3.5-4 years, recognised the relevance of the case of Dr. Emery to me, and the issue of professional jealousy, professional greed within the arena of spine surgery. And what's happened to Dr. Emery, in many ways, is very similar to the unfortunate situation that I went through. The difference, however, was that I decided to stay in America and to investigate and contest and find out what was going on. Now, there have been many different articles written about my case, and the events surrounding my case, the legal events, the professional events, were reported widely as the spine turf wars. And one of the pieces, which I'd like to read out, because I think it captures a lot of the elements of the story, was published back in 2014, and the title of the piece is Governor Christie's State of New Jersey continues to be the front line for the spine turf wars. And it starts off by saying, court testimony delivered over 2 days of hearings in New Jersey versus Dr. Richard Kaul has helped to clarify the essential elements of minimally invasive spine surgery, abbreviated as MISS, the impact of which will be felt globally across the entire medical field, experts say. Solomon Kamson, MD, PhD, testifying June the 17th and 18th on behalf of Dr. Kaul, provided an authoritative set of criteria dubbed the Rule of Five, in an effort to clarify the speciality of minimally invasive spine surgery. Dr. Kamson is also the president of the Society for Advanced Spinal Intervention, abbreviated as SASI, was asked by the court to describe the generally accepted components of MISS and to further elucidate the key elements that SASI has embraced. His testimony, now established as a matter of public record, appears below. And he defined MISS and the Rule of Five. And the first rule was Fluroscopic Guidance And Interpretation, FGI. The second was minimal muscle dissection. The third was must qualify for outpatient surgery. The fourth was minimal blood loss, less than 150 cc's. And the fifth was time from completion of surgery to discharge, less than 12 hours. The proposed definition of minimally invasive spine surgery is a groundbreaking first step with profound ramifications for the medical community in addition to the formulation of healthcare policy, laws and regulations, says Dr. Campson. SASE has expounded upon fundamental elements for contemporary practice of MISS as part of a broader effort to clarify well-established techniques. Such standards are badly needed, not only for health policy in the United States, but globally. That's why this case is of immense interest to SASE, and part of the reason why I travelled across the country to testify on behalf of Dr. Kaul. Dr. Campson added that SASE is committed to working with other societies and organisations to promote a better understanding, training, proctoring and credentialing of future generations of talented MIS surgeons. New Jersey versus Dr. Richard Kaul is at the centre of a legal battle between the traditional spine surgeons who perform inpatient, open back surgery in hospitals and physicians such as Dr. Kaul, myself, who perform outpatient, laser-assisted procedures in clinics and ambulatory surgical centres. Known collectively as the Spine Turf Wars, the battle has given rise to a plethora of lawsuits over what constitutes safe, effective standards and practice of medicine related to the surgical treatment of back and neck pain. Minimally invasive spine surgery, not my client, is what is really on trial in New Jersey, said Charles Shaw, Esquire, defence attorney for Dr. Kaul. The outcome of this case will have significant ramifications in the medical and legal practice concerning MISS well into the future. So that was an article that was written about spine turf wars and about my case in New Jersey. And one of the major components actually to the professional battle that I've talked about extensively, written about extensively, and published multiple pieces about is the issue of political corruption that underpinned the spine turf wars. And for those of you that have been following me and my story and the case over the last 4 years, you'll all know that my position, and it's been now proven beyond fact, is that Governor Christie received $10 million from a small group of local neurosurgeons in Newark, New Jersey. And in return, he was asked to instruct the medical board to suspend my license. Now, that didn't happen in a vacuum. There were a number of other parties involved in this medical equivalent of Bridgegate. Bridgegate just happened to be the biggest and the most high-profile Christie-related scandal. There was also the scandal with regard to the pension fund. There was a scandal with regards to a prosecutor in Hunterdon County called Bennett Barlin, who was trying to prosecute one of Christie's allies, and Christie sent his Attorney General in to shut Bennett Barlin down. So there's been many scandals around Mr. Christie, and they all came out, and I think that's why his political career is over. But that said, whilst this was all going on, I put together a chart, and it's called Jerseygate, A Perfect Storm. Now, many people have seen it, and a lot of people ask me questions about the chart. And one of the most frequent questions people ask me is, how did you know about this information? And the answer is that when my license was first suspended, a lot of my patients in New Jersey who were also involved in the political process came in and told me what was going on. And they said, Dr. Kaul, this is what's happening, and this is what went on, and Mr. Christie received a lot of money, and you're unfortunately the guy whose license they're going to take. So as I started to gather information, I started to put it down onto this chart, and I organised the information into 4 different categories. There's the doctors and the medical board, there's hospitals, there's politicians, and there's lawyers. And they're all laid out on the chart with their different relationships indicated by arrows. And the chart's going to be a part of the video, and people can look at the chart. But very simply, at the top of the chart is a picture of Mr. Christie, who used to be the US Attorney and then became the Governor of the state of New Jersey. And all of the entities that wanted my license taken, gave money, funneled money one way or the other towards Mr. Christie for his political campaign. So that included principally a group of neurosurgeons at the University of Medicine and Dentistry, New Jersey, principally led by a Dr. Robert Heery, a Dr. Gregory Przybylski, and a Dr. Peter Carmel, who interestingly also happened to be the 2011 president of the American Medical Association. Dr. Przybylski was also a politically inclined physician and was the 2011 president of the North American Spine Society. And Dr. Robert Heery was supposedly a big political figure at UMDNJ. But those are the three main doctors, and then there were a number of different law firms involved. But what the neurosurgeons wanted to do was to stop the interventional pain physicians from practicing minimally invasive spine surgery. And because my practice was one of the most high profile and busiest, they thought that I would be the most suitable target. And that's, that was the prelude to the suspension of the license. So this chart, as I said, it at first glance, when people have looked at it, they call me up and they say, there's a lot going on the chart, and I'm like, there is, but it's really, if you follow each box around, it makes sense. And the arrows on the chart indicate where the money is flowing to. And what the chart indicates is that all the money is flowing towards Mr. Christie. Now, ultimately, what Mr. Christie did was not good for healthcare because it stymied competition. And competition in medicine is good because it causes standards to be raised. When you have, as in any industry, you have a monopoly. What happens is prices go up artificially and standards come down. But when you have an open free market and you have competition and you have innovative ideas coming in, that ultimately is better for the population because you have costs coming down, you have innovative technologies coming in, and you have more physicians able to provide these minimally invasive services to the patient population. So Mr. Christie did this really out of a position of political self-interest. He wanted the money for his campaign. He wasn't really thinking about what it was going to do to the healthcare system in New Jersey or what it was going to do to the citizens of New Jersey. That really wasn't his concern. But I think that with the introduction of the Affordable Health Care Act, one of the main threads of that is the promotion of innovative techniques. And I think that the utilization of minimally invasive and percutaneous techniques to correct spinal problems, not just by neurosurgeons, but also by interventional pain physicians and interventional radiologists, is something that is now much more commonplace, and as the Affordable Health Care Act becomes implemented, is going to become the standard of care. So I think this particular professional battle, this the spine turf wars and the spine turf wars in Australia. And actually what I failed to mention as well was Dr. Campson, who, the article will be on the video, but Dr. Campson himself, back in 1999-2000, had his own battle in Seattle, in the state of Washington, with a small group of neurosurgeons out there because he was doing some very innovative spine work, and his background and training was from anesthesia and interventional pain. So I think that spine surgery and spinal procedures have gotten to a point now where they can be done in an outpatient setting, they can be done on a same-day basis, they have a much lower incidence of infection, there's a much lower incidence of blood loss, patients experience a lot less pain post-operatively, which means they can be discharged the same day, and they don't need to be prescribed powerful opiates, which is good because their recovery is a lot more rapid. And the majority of patients who were employed before their surgery are able to return to work within 2 to 4 weeks. Now that, compared to the old-fashioned way, where patients would be in hospital for 5-6 days, They had a much higher incidence of infection. Blood loss was about 2,000 cc's, which is 10 to 20 times as much. They would be discharged on very powerful opiate and narcotic medications, to which some of them would become dependent and subsequently addicted. And a lot of them were not able to return to work because of the extreme disability associated with the surgery. So, minimally invasive spine surgery is definitely better for patients. I think it's the standard of care now. The physicians performing it has changed, and I don't think we're going to see another spine turf war ever again. But I'm sure we'll see another medical professional battle, if not in the States, then in some parts of the world. So I'd like to thank you all for watching this episode of 9, and good night.
Thank you.